Hi, it's Thursday, May 12th, 2016. Yeah, I want to talk about Italy this morning and how Italy is sinking. Um, there's an interesting article in the telegraph.co.uk, which I'll link to it, by Ambrose Evans Pritchard. He's an economics writer for the Telegraph. And the headline in his article says, Italy must choose between the euro and its own economic survival. So a little bit of background on Italy, because many people think that things have been as they have forever, that Italy is a country or a state, that Germany is a country, even the United States, that it's been as it is for over 200 years. But if you look deeply into the history, it hasn't. The United States almost broke up during the Civil War in 1861 to 1865. The southern states seceded from the Union, and there's a bloody civil war to put it back together. Hawaii, I think, became a state only in the late 50s. So things change. Germany didn't unify as a nation until 1871. Before that, Germany, as we know today, were just small principalities that had nothing to do with each other except culture and language. World War II, Germany was broken up in two, East and West Germany. It was only, 50 years later in 1990, 91 when Germany reunified. So things change. And the same thing with Italy. Italy was only unified in 1861. Before that, it was just principalities as well. So you have to go back to Roman times, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, for the last time that Italy was unified. And even during World War II, Italy lost some territory, gained some territory. The British Empire, the same thing, the UK. Ireland was part of the UK until 1920, I think, and then it broke apart, Southern Ireland. The British Empire lost, the bulk of its holdings, after World War II. So, yeah, when you talk about Italy collapsing, that it has to leave Europe, the European Union, the Euro, it might sound radical, but in my opinion, it's a normal course of events. Political unions and states are not sacrosanct, and they're not fixed in, etched in stone that they should be. So yeah, Italy, 1861, it reunified. It was actually, a kingdom until 1946. And in 1946, after the war, Italians voted to become a republic. And Europe and Italy also joined the European Union. It was the, I think, Steel and Coke agreement in 1958. So Italy's been one of the founding fathers of the European Union. But, it's a big country in terms of population, 60 million people. That's the latest estimate. GDP is the 12th biggest economy in the world. And that's a bit worrying because I think 10, 15 years ago, Italy was in the top 5, if not, well into the top 10 GDP. So 12th. With 2.174 trillion annual GDP. So, it's not Greece. It is a very important country, and it's got one of the biggest debt to GDP ratios in the world. So, yeah, it's a tricky situation. So, looking at the article from Ambrose Evans Pritchard, he's talking about how Italy has been in a debt spiral, debt deflation spiral since the crisis of '08. And in the article, he talks to different characters in Italy, you know, the governor of the Bank of Italy, or Banca d'Italia, Mr. Visco. According to him, Italy has lost 9% of its GDP since the peak of the crisis of '08. So the recovery hasn't happened in Italy. I think Italy is more in a depression. You have in the Mezzogiorno, which is the south of Italy, the poorer part of Italy, south of Rome, youth unemployment is running into the 50 to 60% area. It's really bad. And also, according to this article, manufacturing or industrial production in Italy is dropped by 25% in the, you know, since the crisis. And yeah, and the other big problem with Italy, as it's you know, before the crisis, it always had a very high debt to GDP ratio. You know, even before the crisis, the Italian debt to GDP has been above 100% for ages. And since 2011, according to this article, you know, the debt to GDP ratio has gone from 121%, and that's public debt, of course, to 132.7 right now, so just around 133%. And that's not because, you know, the Italian government has been, you know, profligate or spending a lot of money and not cutting back. No, it's because the denominator of that ratio is shrinking, the GDP. Italy has actually, you know, they've been applying a lot of cuts and austerity to the public sector. And despite that, this debt to GDP ratio keeps increasing because the EU and the Eurozone, the European Union and the Eurozone, they've imposed rules on all the countries, and Italy included, that are actually don't work out when a country like Italy is in such dire economic situation. You know, Italy would need, in the past, before Italy joined the euro, Italy would inflate its currency, which I don't think is a great thing, but that's what they do. They would inflate their way out of, you know, recessions. Now they can't. And even the rules for, you know, banking rules in the EU are putting Italy in a straitjacket, because Italian bank's balance sheet has 19% of non-performing loans, and the Italian government had tried to come up with a more Anglo-Saxon solution, as Ambrose Evans Pritchard says, and create a bad bank to place all those bad non-performing loans on that bad bank. But the EU and Eurozone rules don't allow for that. So Italy's been forced, the government has been forced to start a fund called the Atlante Fund. And I'll put a link about this fund below. And there's a story from April 19th about this fund. It says, on Bloomberg, it says, Italy Bank Lifeline buys time as Atlas show Herculean task. So basically this Atlante Fund is making all the Italian banks chip in to try to help and save the big banks in Italy. So it just doesn't make sense. For example, Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena, which is the oldest bank in the world, I think it's from the 1500s or even earlier, in Siena, in Tuscany, that bank has been bailed out twice in the last 2 years or so by the Italian state. And it's really in dire straits, but it's been asked to chip in 50 million euros to this fund to help out other banks that are failing. So it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, the Eurozone and the euro basically is putting a straitjacket on Italy. And I personally think the reason for that is that, you know, the financial powers that be, the central banks, the ECB and the creditors, they're in charge. And they can't allow Italy to leave the euro, because that basically means defaulting on hundreds of, well, if not, I think trillions, really, trillions of euros in debt for cheaper lira. That would be a default. And that's why the Eurozone, the ECB, they've been imposing all these rules. But the Prime Minister of Italy, he needs to make a choice. Matteo Renzi, that's the Prime Minister of Italy, if he wants to be reelected in the next elections, he's going to have to run on a platform that we're going to leave, the European Union and the Eurozone, or else, Italy is going to sink into chaos. The situation is really dire, especially in the south of Italy with all the unemployment. And the other thing he talks about, Ambrose Evans Pritchard, is that the birth rate in the south of Italy is the lowest it's been since 1862, which is the first year that Italy became, an independent, unified country. Prior to that, the south of Italy was a kingdom of Naples and the two Sicilies. They were allied to the Spanish crown, I think. I'm not too sure, but you have to go back that far, 155 years almost. So, yeah. So, basically, he's saying, and I agree with him, Ambrose Evans Pritchard, Italy either leaves the EU or Eurozone or it collapses into chaos, in my opinion. And according to the latest Ipsos Mori survey or poll, 48% of Italians would vote to leave the euro and the Eurozone if given the chance right now. And I guess now, the Eurozone or the European Union has really shot itself in the foot. And the intention of the European Union going back to the 50s was to create more cohesion in Europe, so to avoid world wars like they'd had prior in the early 20th century. But in my opinion, if anything, it's creating the conditions for a new war. Maybe not a world war, but a war within all these countries in Europe, civil wars, and revolt and frustration and chaos. So it's had the opposite effect of what, the powers that be wanted back in the 50s. And that's not surprising because politicians, their plans usually have the opposite effect. And it's taken a long time, but it seems to be playing out that way. And that's why the Brexit referendum for the UK on June 23rd is so important. If the UK vote to leave the European Union, even though we're not in the Eurozone, we don't have the euro, but it will most probably, or 99% sure that it will create a domino effect. And Italians, they will say, if the British have voted to leave the European Union, why can't we? So that's why it's important. And the central banks, they're in the background. They're protecting the creditors. And I'm sure they'll put up a fight to keep Italy, sinking. That's what they want. They want their pound of flesh. And that's a shame. So if you enjoyed this video, please press the like button below, share it with friends, colleagues, or family, and subscribe to my channel. And take care. Bye.